of mental illness in the previous year. And in the more equal countries on the right, Japan, Germany, Spain, you can see levels of mental illness less than 10%, fewer than 1 in 10 of the population. In Australia and the UK, 23% of us have had some kind of mental illness in the past year, and in the USA it's more than 1 in 4. Okay, on the next slide, we have homicide rates, and here we're showing you data from colleagues in Canada. Again, we're looking at the US states, those are the red dots, but here also the Canadian provinces, a measure of income inequality across the bottom, and a measure of homicide upside. And you can see that in the more equal of the Canadian provinces over on the left, there are around 15 murders per million people per year. But up in the more unequal of those US states, the rate is 10 times higher, more like 150 murders per million people per year. And this vast size of effect that we're seeing time after time in these slides, with really large differences between the more equal and the less equal societies, are very important.
That's been shared a lot of times.
Moving on to imprisonment rates on the next slide, these are highly correlated with inequality. Now the scale on the left-hand side now is prisoners per 100,000. This is on a log scale, where the difference between 10 and 100 is the same as between 100 and 1,000 on that scale, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to fit the USA onto the slide. And you can see that if you know a country's level of inequality, you can pretty accurately predict its level of imprisonment. And researchers have shown that this isn't primarily due to differences in crime rate. It's actually a measure of more harsh punitive sentencing. People being more likely to be sent to prison for particular offences and more likely to be sent away for longer. So it's a measure of how harshly a society judges those within it who have violated social norms. And this is the last of these single slides I'm going to show, showing particular measures on our index, and this is social mobility. And some people think that you need a certain level of inequality to drive aspiration and creativity. And actually what this graph shows is the opposite of that, because we don't have so much social mobility in more unequal countries as we do in the equal ones. So the measure here is a measure of intergenerational income mobility. Do rich fathers have rich sons? And over on the left, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, even Canada, Germany have much higher rates of social mobility. Rich fathers are less likely to have rich sons and poor fathers, poor sons, than in the UK, and particularly in the land of opportunity, the USA. So just to conclude this section, I'd say, for those who wish to live the American dream, I would buy a ticket to Denmark. I'm going to hand back to Richard now, just to sum up and interpret what we've shown you.
Yes, I think that graph is very important because people are endlessly talking about equal opportunity as if we've got anywhere near it and as if that justified the huge inequalities in income. But what this graph is really telling us is that we can't get anywhere near equal opportunities for children while we have very big income differences. It's as if the social ladder was steeper or the rungs further apart. On the next slide, you can see the range of things that we've looked at in relation to inequality. They're all actually problems that have social gradients, which, like health, are worst at the bottom of the social ladder. What we believe is that inequality exacerbates or intensifies the effects of social status differentiation. So we've all those things seem to have relationships with inequality internationally, and nearly all of them in the United States as well. We show the data in our book on all those. how inequality affects the poor, the differences Kate was showing you are so big because all of us are affected by inequality. We can see that from, not only by inferring that from the size of the differences, but if there are some studies which, like this one on the screen, show how people compare in more and less equal societies at different levels in the social hierarchy. So this shows you infant mortality in Sweden and England and Wales. England and Wales, the taller red bars. And they're classified by father's occupational class. That's why single mothers are on their own in that group on the left. And then the lowest social class, that's the unskilled manual workers, going through towards the skilled manual, the junior non-manual, and finishing up on the right with the professional occupations, doctors, lawyers, directors of larger companies. But you see, Sweden, the more equal country, does better than England and Wales right across the board. Even in social class 1, they do a bit better. And we show, I think, 5 different sets of data in our book where basically there's this same pattern. Inequality making most difference at the bottom of society, but even conferring some benefit at the top. And people have done much more sophisticated analyses that show the same sort of pattern using multi-level models. On the next slide, just very quickly, we suggest some of the processes involved that really we're talking about the psychosocial effects of inequality. That bigger income differences driving bigger status differences, bigger social distances, if you like, lead to more feelings of superiority and inferiority, and with that more status competition. We judge ourselves, we judge each other more by status, and there's more status insecurity. And going with that, much more insecurity about how we're seen and judged. Those what social psychologists call social evaluation anxieties. I think it's really the damage that inequality does to the quality of social relations in society that is the key driver for many of these outcomes we've been looking at. There are more specific pathways involved in each, whether you're looking at obesity or mental illness or drugs or any of the other outcomes that seem to be worse in more unequal societies. And before we finish, just a word on the next slide about what we do about this. It's not simply a matter of redistribution through higher taxes and more generous benefits, because we see in the data that there are some societies which gain greater equality before taxes, by having smaller income differences before taxes, like, for instance, Japan, or in the United States, New Hampshire. Other places, like Sweden, or in the United States, Vermont, gain their narrow income differences by redistribution, by higher taxes, more generous welfare systems. But you can do it either way. I think raising taxes in general in the present political climate is difficult, but we can do something perhaps about tax avoidance and tax havens. I think many people don't realise that in a lot of our societies, taxation, at least income taxes, are no longer progressive. I think the way to reduce income differences before taxes is to make people at the top once more answerable to people elsewhere in the company. I think that the bonus culture reflects people at the top feeling they don't have to answer to anyone. And whether we make them answerable by having more trade union representatives on